everyone, and welcome back to today's episode of Blooming Daily. Thank you so much for joining us on our third episode. This is so exciting. It's been an interesting past few weeks with exams and so many things going on. But I am so happy to be back with another exciting episode. But this episode is not just exciting because of its content. It's also very exciting because we have an amazing guest. Oh my gosh. Please join me in welcoming Kate Nicholson.
Hey everybody, it's good to be here.
Welcome, Kate. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. This is simply amazing. I have been so excited to hold this podcast episode with you because you have such an amazing energy and so many wonderful insights. So, Kate, how are you doing today?
Hey, well, I'm doing pretty well today. Today is a beautiful day here in Maine, and everyone's starting to catch their breath just a little bit, one day at a time, closer to the end of finals, and I can kind of feel that as I move around campus. I know for some there's plenty still to be done, so I don't want to rush, but it does start to feel like you can see the end, and that can change how you feel right now. Plus, I have to say, I slept pretty well last night. Hasn't been the case entirely all week. I would say just the night before, I have a daughter who's 9 years old, and she had a rough night. She did not sleep well. And when she doesn't sleep well, Mama doesn't sleep well. So she woke me up a few times, just uncomfortable. She's okay. But yeah, it doesn't take much to have good sleep interrupted. So I think I slept well last night because I needed to. My body was able to catch up from the night before, the night or two before that, which was kind of crummy sleep, and I was a little extra tired. So it depends on which day you ask me. But this is a good topic, I tell you that.
Yeah. In fact, glad you mentioned sleep because today we're going to be speaking about sleep and, why people struggle with sleep and how we can know when we aren't getting enough sleep and what we can do to get better sleep, right? So thank you for that review on sleep, and thank you for mentioning that it's not like that every day, because I think it's important to know that we're not perfect, and just we say on this podcast that it's about progress, not perfection, right?
That's right.
And so it's important to know that you would struggle, and it's okay because everybody struggles. You're not struggling alone. If that's something that you don't know, it's that you're not struggling alone. So thank you for introducing us to this topic, Kate. And you mentioned how you slept last night, and for me, it's very interesting too because I also haven't been getting good sleep. I know some of my friends will listen to this and be like, Ruth, you have been getting very bad sleep. I know there are people who are waiting to call me out. They're waiting for me to just release this episode so that they can call me out. But it's just to show that we all struggle with sleep at certain times of our lives, right? So for me, I'm currently writing exams. Right now that we're recording this episode, I'm writing exams, and it's very interesting that even when I know what to do to get better sleep, it's hard because I have so much work to do, and reading for exams, I'm turning in papers and projects and all of that. So I haven't been getting the best sleep, I know, guys. But I'm happy that exams are ending soon, and I can apply the tips we want to share with you today to fix my sleep. And I know that once the season is over, I can better adjust to sleeping properly, right? Exactly. And so, Kate, I was wondering, what are some of the reasons you think people struggle with their sleep the most? Because I think it's very common for people to struggle with sleep. Interestingly, I was looking at statistics for sleep-related issues, and I saw that over 70% young people have sleep-related issues. That's just mind-blowing because over 70% of people, that's such a high figure. So I was wondering, like, why do you think so many people struggle with their sleep?
Well, I think that statistics is really important. And there's a lot of information out there on sleep. Like, sleep is getting a lot of attention. It's getting to reach national headlines with some frequency, as in so many headlines having to do with mental health and well-being, especially through the pandemic. But also because when it's 70%, like you said, you're not, anyone who's struggling with their sleep, just know that you're not struggling alone, because that means it's not a personal issue. It's not an individual issue. This is something that we are struggling with, I would say, by and large, societally. So that's something that's really important to acknowledge. When we talk about health and well-being, we often talk about it in individual terms, right? Just more self-care. And while I'm not opposed to self-care, I am really, I try to be really thoughtful around how we use that term, because it's not a catch-all. It's not something that will fix everything at all. And we absolutely have to acknowledge systemic implications or social and cultural conditions that are really set up to disturb and interrupt and compromise our well-being. And sleep is one of those examples that I think doesn't get the contextual recognition that it has a lot to do with, capitalism and consumerism, and the fact that sleep feels like a huge inconvenience for so many people, that we don't have time to sleep. Our bodies and our minds need for sleep is thought of as this extreme inconvenience to the life we're trying hard to keep up with. And so what are the driving forces between this life that we're trying to keep up with is really important to recognize that there are some big issues messaging culturally around that tend to override and dismiss the human body's needs. So that said, some of the elements that show up as a result of like widespread cultural conditioning to keep up and the swift, rapid pace of life by itself is really hard to recover from. It's not necessarily often a sustainable rhythm for our bodies. So when we are trying to cram and pull all-nighters, that's not a sustainable, habit. And so it really it's kind of like throwing a wrench into our system of these really beautiful intelligence of our bodies, this finely tuned network of hormones and electrical currents and all of these things that kind of create what we call circadian rhythms or ultradian rhythms. Circadian rhythm is a 24-hour clock, and an ultradian rhythm is something that happens like throughout a day, whereas a circadian rhythm might happen like once a day or once a night. So we have different layers of rhythms that we really need to practice acknowledging and trying to partner with our bodies rather than overriding our bodies. So the swift pace of our lifestyles tends to override our biorhythms, trying to do so much, right? The expectation that we are more than human, and the degree to which we have expectations simply could be the fact that we have a list to do, our to-do list today, that is just much longer and more extensive than what we can actually pull off. And then how we feel about that lack of accomplishment at the end of the day can set a tone that's not very conducive to sleep. I might feel anxious about all that I didn't accomplish.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that the one other piece that I'll mention in terms of what gets in the way of our sleep is other factors that we often do unconsciously that are just symptoms of a modern lifestyle. And we're sitting in a room right now in the basement of a building, and there are fluorescent lights up above my head.
Yeah.
And so light is a huge condition for our circadian rhythms.
Absolutely.
And so when we keep our lights on or our lights coming through our screens, whether our cell phones or our computer screens or our TV screens, although that's a little less intense because we're usually sitting at a distance versus up close, we are, again, ignoring the body's innate drives to start to wind down. We're interrupting some of those hormonal releases that want to be cued by light or by dark. So anyway, there's just some symptoms of modern life at large that really confuse our bodies. I think these are some things like the pace of life, the how much, the quantity of what we're doing, and then therefore not maybe even psychologically digesting throughout the day. We don't really build in great buffer to the action of doing so much and like integrating it and processing it. We don't have a lot of that kind of space, and that can compromise our sleep. And then just the modernity of our lifestyles, where we're not really attuned to the natural elements that our bodies are craving to get their cues from, but we're imposing other cues, like stay up a little later, like keep the lights on, keep the noise on. The busyness of our sensory faculties can confuse the body's rhythms. Those are a few elements anyway that I think are very common and normal and natural for so many people to like not recognize or how they're influencing or interrupting the way our bodies set the stage to sleep well.
So many great points, and I like how you spoke about how there are some things that some factors that are like cultural and social that we don't realize, because I think yes, it's very important, because I'm taking this class on sociology and it really made me like look at things with like the lens of sociology, and helped me see that, just like you said, many of these things are also not personal. You might think just like it's something that should be fixed individually, but it's not like that. Sometimes it's like something that needs to be fixed collectively, something that needs to be fixed in our societal structures, right? Because those things affect how people sleep and how they eat and how much is on their mind and how much they can act. And so all of that is very important. And in fact, maybe one day we could go into the sociology of sleep and how maybe the society is affecting our sleep, and, or how like, yes, how the structures around us are affecting our sleep. But thank you so much for bringing that up. That was very, very great. And so I was also wondering, Kate, because you've spoken to students and you've seen a lot of people try to fix their sleep. What would you say is the hardest thing for people when trying to fix their sleeping like pattern? Like, okay, so this person comes, I really think I sleep really poorly and I want to really do something about it. But what would you say is usually the issue when people are trying to fix their sleep? What patterns do you see?
Ooh. Well, even the languaging right there gets my attention. The word fix is certainly how we feel towards sleep that's not happening very well, right? When we are overtired, and we'll talk maybe about what that looks like when we are sleep deprived, but when we recognize we are not sleeping well, we're not falling asleep or we're not staying asleep, and we certainly aren't feeling rested when we wake up and move into our day. When that is the case, especially when it's a case in a more chronic situation versus every once in a while we all have a crummy night of sleep. But when it's ongoing and starting to become a pattern, and a pattern that we seem to be stuck in, and then digging a hole of sleep deprivation, when that feels like the embodied landscape that we're living, it's very normal and natural to feel like we want to fix it. But when we use the word fix in the conversation of our bodies, it's really changing the way that we're thinking about our bodies to a point of our body is a project, or a body, again, is an inconvenience, right? So when we have all this to do and we feel like the pressures of our performance or our accomplishment are being compromised by the lack of sleep and all of the secondary and other layers of repercussions from that, it gets very stressful and overwhelming, and we want to just fix it, as in we want to make it go away. Yeah. We want to make it better or back to normal, if you will. But bodies don't really respond to being fixed.
That's true.
Maybe a broken bone, Okay, so sometimes maybe emergency medicine or something, you can find some exceptions to what I'm saying for sure. But by and large, when we're trying to look to support our mind and our body to come back into a balanced stage, which is often something that requires homeostasis, right? Mm-hmm. And homeostasis is often a condition of the body that is a chemical, like a chemical cocktail that is in right relationship with each other. And so when we interfere with that, we get all kinds of spikes and dips and like chaos in the body. And we want to try to fix the chaos, but the fixing feels stressful to the body.
It really does.
Right? It kind of gets interpreted to the body as like, oh my gosh, now I'm under pressure to be something else. Even when we're fine, like we're off kilter. And we need recalibration. Recalibration for me feels more like partnership and not fixing. And partnership requires a lot of compassion and respect for the body. And respect for the body is not where the body is an inconvenience. It's where the body is a site and a place of dwelling that requires desires our utmost respect and patience and like honoring its needs. Like they matter just as much as our to-do list. So fixing is maybe a word I would challenge right out of the gate. Yeah, but I understand why it feels that way. So that said, if we're not trying to fix the body and yet we're still struggling with sleep, where does that leave us? For me, it leaves us in a place of like, wow, let's come back and understand our bodies, right? Because our bodies, again, we kind of live from the neck up. We live in our thoughts, we live in our plans, we live in our hopes and expectations. But the body in and of itself, how it operates, we might have a basic understanding, but we might not understand it when it feels like it's not living well, right? So when our sleep is messed up, if you will, we don't really understand why. So anyway, I think that coming back to really just being open and curious and compassionate and interested in understanding our bodies is the first step to break up with the fix and start to reorient towards like partnership.
Yes.
Yeah, like so it's a whole different relationship with the body. That is like number one, which honestly is not the most exciting or sexiest response that I could give a student. Like I totally get that. People want the fix because they want to like tell me 1, 2, 3 things that I can do so that I feel
and
better.
Boom, my sleep is fixed.
Right, we all want that. Like I totally understand that. And yet, if it were that easy, we probably wouldn't be a 70% sleep struggle statistic, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So rephrase your question for me. Give me some more pointedness around what you seek when it comes to relationship with the body.
What would you say has been like the patterns you found that like hinders people the most? Why do you think it's so hard? Why do you think people struggle with that the most?
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to acknowledge is when you live in community, your body is in relationship with a lot of other bodies.
Yes.
Right? And it's just not always so straightforward to do what you need to do for your body. So even when we're in the process of relating to our bodies as a place of respect and, legitimate needs, it still can be tricky because you might have a roommate that has a very different lifestyle than you, and they're louder or they're later at night or they wake up earlier than you. So living in community provides a whole stretch of challenges that I want to acknowledge that are kind of unique to college or campus life. So some of those things can be taken up with residential life. Sometimes just being a roommate is not necessarily being a best friend, right?
Yeah, that's
it's being
true.
A companion, like a lifestyle person that has a compatible lifestyle to you, more or less. I think that's kind of interesting to think about environmental conditions. So who you live with and then the lifestyle in that space is one consideration that I think can come up as a struggle for a lot of students. And so it could be responded to in like a residential life conversation, or it can be something that you talk directly to the people you're living with. And it's like, hey, this is like what works for me. Tell me what works for you. And let's see if we can keep supporting each other so we don't get sick or get stressed or frustrated. So communicating your needs to the people you live with, recognizing the environment around which you are trying to sleep and wake. So are there ways that you can create the conditions? So the more you try to push your body down into sleep if you will, and not set the stage for sleep to net. Sleep is an innate need. Our bodies know how to sleep. We just kind of get in the way of it.
True.
So how do we set the conditions for the body to do what it needs and wants? Simple things like trying to keep your room temperature a little bit cooler, not too hot. Getting some fresh airflow is nice this time of year, here in Maine anyway, as we come into spring, summer. Sound. Some people will use earplugs. Some people will use a sound machine. Some people will use like an app that has ambient music, or like a guided meditation into sleep. Those actually are really popular, is guided meditations, because it's interrupting the busy mind, and it's also cueing the sensory faculties of sound into like a state of relaxation or ease, or starting to make associations. So now your body knows when you click on that app, it's starting to like be cued to shift gears in your nervous system. And so you start to set up positive biofeedback versus the negative biofeedback of when I see my bread and I know that I need to go to sleep, I start to get stressed out because falling asleep is hard, and then that gets reinforced. So setting the stage through sound, through temperature, through conversations, just so people are supporting your body's needs in your living space, are some simple ways to set yourself up well, versus what we often do is we're like, and darkening the room, of course, like shades, curtains, lights, will help, again, the sensory faculty of light, and the body responds well to that. So instead, though, what do? We stay on our screens really late. We kind of log off at the end of the day, maybe with like 20 browsers pages open, right? And so our mind kind of has like 20 unfinished conversations or pieces of business.
That's so true.
That are still trying to like figure out how to like calm or dial down, and like a lot of unfinished business. And we try to jump into sleep or just kind of hit the bed because we're exhausted. But then we find ourselves experiencing something that's like, it feels like wired and tired. My body and my eyeballs are like exhausted, but my mind is still wired. So mentally, my mind is still reeling and my body is craving sleep, but they're not having the same experience. Our minds and our bodies are like on different pages. And so they're not integrated, right? We live with a neck up. We kind of proceed through our day right to the last minute of the day from our neck up, and then just assume our body is going to be there, or that our mind will drop into our body immediately. But a lot of us need a routine to help us transition out of the thinking, doing mind into the feeling, felt experience of the body. So befriending or partnering versus fixing is the environmental pieces I mentioned, but now also setting a routine, even if it's a 10-minute routine, but ideally 30 minutes, where you've logged off. You maybe are starting to like play some music that you know will start to calm your mind. Maybe you do some stretching. Maybe you go for a walk and get outside in some fresh air, which is going to interrupt that hook into like the thinking and the screens. And then your body starts to associate these actions with anticipating sleep or calm or rest. So starting to have a dialogue or a conversation that your body understands, right? Kind of speaking the language of your body through actions that set or segue to transition towards like a state of calm, a state of ease, not worry, not anticipation, but really just being okay with how things are winding down. So how you start your day, but how right now we're talking about how you end your day. The bookends of your day have a lot to do with what happens when you sleep, and a lot to do with happens with how you feel during your day, how you start your day and how you finish your day. So how you finish your day can become a routine that you create. Does that make sense for how we can set ourselves up for success?
Yes.
Versus how we interrupt or kind of get in the way of the body's ability to fall asleep.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I love that you ended speaking about routines, because I think routines are very important for so many things. They're important for our mental health, our physical health, or health in general. And you also mentioned like partnership with our bodies, how like that also really affects. And I wanted to quickly touch on routines again, because I think that it's important that we identify what kind of routines help us and what kind of routines hurt us. So could you just briefly touch on some routines that are really helpful for us when trying to like understand our sleeping pattern and trying to get into a better sleeping pattern, and some of the routines that hurt us, some of the things that are most times unconscious? Could you just pick maybe one or two on both sides so that people could understand, okay, routines, but what kind of routines are there that I might be doing that are hurting me, or what kind of routines can I adopt that would help me better?
Ooh, okay, great question. So what happens, I think, the first thing that comes to mind that I end up having conversations, or what we call wellness chats with students, to start to individualize some of these ideas and see where we are getting in our own way. In more specifics, something called conditioned arousal. So we have conditioned our nervous system to be in a state of activation, maybe without realizing it. And again, it can be perpetuated by this like feeling that we're never catching up with our work. We're never doing enough. So, the undercurrents are always kind of interesting too, which tend to come from a more emotional place, or a sense of belief system around ourself or our life. So that's interesting maybe for another day. But the conditioned arousal is definitely an important state of being, to be able to recognize what it is and how it feels to us, and when we're in it, when it's at play. So for me, when I'm feeling a conditioned arousal, this is the moment I can notice it if I go to bed and I haven't really created the transition. Because I was in grad school for the last year and a half. I graduated last semester. And so it was a virtual program, it was online, so I was on my screen a lot. I did not have a campus, but it added a lot more screen time to my day. And I would work during the day, I would parent in the evening, and then I would do my schoolwork at night. And I knew that it was not a great, sustainable plan. But sometimes these things, our conditions are what they are. We figure our way out. So I would catch myself if I was up too late. For me, I knew the time I could go to bed and my body would kind of meet me there and fall asleep. And I knew if I stayed up too late, past that moment of like a natural dip in my energy, kind of like you're at the computer and you just can't pay attention any longer. Or you can't write more. You're just like, I can't conjure up the words and the ideas I'm trying to articulate here. I know I'm done, but we tend to push past that place.
Oh, I do that all the time.
All the time. Because we feel like we're never going to get it done. So at that place, we tend not to be as productive as we think we're going to be anyway, if and when we push past. Okay, that's a choice. But also when I push past and I fall and I decide like an hour later, I did my work, I cranked it out, and I go to bed and I'm lying in bed. I'm like, okay, good. I'm so tired. I can't wait to go to bed. Finally, I'm here. I go to bed and I'm staring at the ceiling and I'm finally there. Like, I know I'm tired. I know my body needs rest. I also know that it needs rest for tomorrow because I'm going to have to get up and do it all over again. But there's something that my mind is still buzzing. I can't downshift. I feel stuck in this conditioned arousal or the state of activation.
That's so true.
I did not create a segue. I did not create transition. So for me to know my body, I know it when I lie in bed and I'm all tucked in and I'm done. I've broken up with like the list. I'm cutting it off. I'm going to bed, pick it up tomorrow. And yet I'm like awake and I'm like, that is messed up. Mm-hmm. What's wrong? I want to fix this, right? I want to fix it. Push my eyes, like, just go to sleep. And then I get stressed at that moment because I know I'm going to be tired the next day, and I got a lot to do the next day too, right? So this is kind of like where our cultural conditioning comes in too. Like, you always have to keep going. And we have seen a resurgence or a reclamation of this phenomenon. I say it phenomenon like we have to, rest. I don't know if you've seen out in the world or on the social channels, there's a lot of like books coming out, a lot of other podcast conversations happening, a lot of different communities that are saying, you know what? I deserve to rest. Rest is my right. And so that's another conversation for another day, because if I don't believe that and I don't trust that, rest is okay, rest is valuable, I am worthy already, and I'm worthy of rest. If I don't believe that, then I lie in bed and I say, oh shit, I'm going to be tired again tomorrow and I'm digging a hole and now I'm worried I'm never going to get out, right? That fades overwhelm. So for me, when I lie in bed and I know I'm tired and I could fall asleep, but I can't, that's where I recognize like you are stuck in an activation state, Kate. So for me, as someone that likes to do practices with my body, I will get out of bed. At that point, I know I'm already it's not going to go in any direction that's helpful. I'm going to lie there. I'm going to get stressed out. I'm going to start reeling in my mind. So I break up with that. I get out of bed. I might go to the bathroom. I might go get some water. I kind of like interrupt that scenario, okay? And then from there, I might say, okay, I could set, a lot of people have these apps where they can have some guided relaxation or guided meditation for sleep. And again, the sleep meditations are usually the most popular used meditations on any of these apps. Why? Because 70% of us are looking for some support. And so you could use that as a way to retrain the activated mind and start to practice deactivation. Because it's hard to do it on our own when we're in conditioned state.
That's true.
So that's one thing. Another thing is I might just lie on the floor and do some stretching. And that for me is really nice. I might just lie down in something called child's pose or lie on my back and hug my knees to my chest and like rock side to side, do some spinal twists. So some really easy peasy gentle yoga, if that's something my body can respond to. For me, that gets me out of my head and more integrated into my body. And then my body starts to get the cue, right? The signal, because it's all about signals, whether we're doing fluorescent lighting signals to stay awake, or we're doing calm music to signal relaxation, or my body is releasing some muscle stress tension from my tissues, and then that starts to release some different biochemicals that start to elicit a response of relaxation, and then I go back to bed. I also am a big fan of reading a personal book. That's how, like, if I don't read my personal book, then my body feels like something's missing and my signal gets confused. So that's my routine, is either I notice an activation state, and if I need to interrupt it or do something else, I will, instead of like just being at the whim of it. And then from there, I will either drink some water, walk around. I will not doom scroll on social media. That might be the worst thing and the easiest thing.
Doom scrolling is really, it's a hole. It's like a...
Yeah. It's so tempting.
It's so tempting.
So where does your phone or device live at night is a really important question. Is it right next to you where it's so tempting and easy to try to assuage some of that discomfort of being up and stressed when you're trying to sleep? Or is it at a distance in another room where you would have to make an effort to go find it? So trying to set yourself up for like helpful steps or actions. Where is your phone is a really good question mark. And I would recommend not using it for your alarm clock, not using it right next to. I know that's hard. But hey, if we're looking for tips, and it's just one of the tips. But where it lives, and then what do you do first thing when you wake up? And what do you do if you can't fall asleep? If it's scrolling social media, just know we're probably not doing ourselves any favors from both the lighting on the screen, which you can adjust, but still, the activation of the images, reinstigating an activation state, the story and the emotional landscape that it might conjure, because we're starting to see images that makes us feel something about that person, and all of that is activating. And we want to deactivate. We want to downshift. So finding a way into your body, walking, stretching, breathing on purpose, or interrupting the mind space and using an app with some guided meditations or mindfulness will help reset the arousal condition. So those are ways. Some people are journalers. I'm not a journaler. I have a lot of empty journals. I keep thinking I might be, and I'm not. But a lot of people will journal out things that happen during their day, or things that they want to remember later, or how they're doing and how they're feeling. And to digest and process some of that accumulation will help the body feel like it doesn't have to do so much of that in our unconscious or subconscious dream state. And if our dreams are really agitated, because we're processing a lot of our day, it might disrupt a sound sleep. So some people, journaling will be one of the ways that they just digest some things for easier transition, right? So our inner resources are available for other things other than trying to digest our day.
Wow, that was so insightful. Thank you so much. That was really, really insightful. And in fact, I briefly wanted to mention that the subject of sleep is very wide. There's so many nuances to this. We could talk about insomnia and all of that.
Yeah.
But that insomnia would be like a topic for another podcast where we can really talk about the biology of all of this, because there are just so many areas that we can cover about sleep, about biology and all of that. And I know that would also give insights to those that have chronic sleep issues, because while for some of us it might be that we just don't sleep well because of the activities we do, for some other people we also recognize that it's biological, that they try to do it on their own but they just can't fix it on their own, right? The problem is it is very internal and they need specialized help. So we could definitely cover that in another episode. And we have another part to cover on sleep deprivation and then what you can even do to fix your sleep. But that would not be on this episode. It will be on our second part. And that will be very insightful, just as insightful as this one. So stay tuned for our second episode where we go over how do you even know that you're sleep deprived and how do you fix it and what are some of the tips and tricks. So thank you so much, Kate, for joining me, and I'll see you again on the second episode.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Ruth.